The Norway maple is one of the more pernicious invasive species in Canada. It exists through subterfuge and deception. They live side by side with good, honest, hard-working sugar maple, all the while plotting their eventual takeover. The general public is often blissfully unaware of the impostors living among us. After today, you will know better. Once upon a time, the elm tree was a staple of Canadian suburban and rural areas. It was prized not just for its majestic shape, but for its wide-spreading dense canopies which provided good shade and acted as an effective windbreak. Dutch elm disease hit in the middle of the 1900s, sweeping across Canada and destroying 98% of elm trees. Civic arborists needed a replacement that would fill a similar aesthetic niche but would also grow fairly quickly. In their infinite wisdom, they decided on the Norway maple. The Norway maple is a direct competitor of the sugar maple. They look very similar, thrive under similar conditions, and can often be found growing side by side. However, despite their outward similarities, the two trees are very different in a practical sense. To begin with, the canopies of Norway maples are denser and spread further than those of sugar maples. This enables them to grow very quickly compared to sugar maples. However, it also makes it difficult for young saplings to come up underneath them. There is another difference that we don't often see or think about, being the way that the roots grow. With a sugar maple, the roots grow as you would expect, starting out shallow when the tree is a sapling and then gradually getting deeper as the tree matures. The Norway maple grows its roots differently. It begins shallow as you would expect, but rather than growing deeper to access additional groundwater, the Norway maple instead opts to weave its roots more densely. This enables the Norway maple to collect a higher percentage of each rainfall, allowing the Norway maple to grow much more quickly. As a result of this, it competes for water not with the mature hardwoods but with saplings and underbrush. This harms the natural succession of the forest. Besides this, the shallow root structures make the Norway maple more susceptible to droughts. It also doesn't provide as strong an anchor, making the Norway maple more likely to be uprooted in a windstorm. Additionally, in fairly old examples, the dense root structures have a tendency to wrap around the trunk of the tree, cutting off circulation and essentially choking the tree to death. In short, Norway maples live fast and die young. It's rare that they live to be 100. They're here for a good time, not for a long time. This mentality also has an effect on the quality of the wood. Because it was built quickly, it tends to be more brittle than that of sugar maple. This makes the lumber less valuable, but also has consequences on the life of the tree. The rapid growth also has some benefits for the tree. They recover from injuries very well. This tree was girdled in an attempt to kill it. The tree shrugged it off and seems to have made a full recovery. The most economically significant difference is the sap production. The trees drip less and for a shorter period. More importantly though, the sugar content of the sap is about 60% that of the sugar maple. This means that it requires just under twice as much sap to make a jar of syrup out of Norway maple, as opposed to sugar maple. Having spoken at great length describing the differences and similarities between Norway and sugar maple, I would like now to show you some easy methods of differentiating the two trees. The first method is by comparing the profile of the leaves. You notice that the Norway maple on the top here has more points and pointier points than the sugar maple below. However, this can be difficult to remember if you're not intimately familiar with the shape of the two leaves. A more reliable method is to flip one of the leaves over and examine the texture of the underside. The Norway maple has a glossy, almost waxy underside, while the underside of the sugar maple is more matte, almost fuzzy like felt. You can see the difference when I hold the two together. This method might still be too difficult for those not familiar with trees, so there's one surefire, unmistakable method. The thing to do is pull off one of the leaves and examine the stem. In a Norway maple, the sap which wells from the stem will be white and milky, whereas in a sugar maple the sap will be clear like water. To reiterate, the leaves have got a lot of pointy points. The underside of the leaves is glossy and a little bit waxy, and the sap in the leaf stems is white like milk. So what can be done to combat this threat to our beloved sugar maples? The axe is probably the simplest solution. We must fight them on the beaches. We must fight them in the forests. We must fight them in the hills. We must fight them in the fields. And we must fight them in the streets. We must never surrender. While a more aggressive solution is required in woodlots and forests and wild places, and while I stand by my position that any Norway maples that can be spared should be cut, in urban areas, well-tended parks, lawns, etc., it might be enough to simply not plant Norway maples, instead planting local sugar maple or some other native species. No one can blame you for not wanting to cut down a mature Norway maple in your backyard. Nevertheless, we have a responsibility, at the very minimum, to not contribute to their spread. One option for those who absolutely must have a Norway maple is the King Crimson breed. The red leaves are the result of extensive selective breeding. One of the side effects of this is that the seeds of the King Crimson maple have extremely low viability. So while it is still a Norway maple, they simply aren't competitive enough to escape into the wild and make a nuisance of themselves. So now you know. Never let yourself be fooled again. Not all maple trees are as they seem. There are impostors that stand among us and will stop at nothing in their pursuit of the downfall of Canadian society. Thank you for watching.